Hello YouTube, I was wrong about Vincent. Let me get right into it. I'm gonna give my shout outs like I said I would about a month later-ish, whenever this video comes out. I've been working on it a bit. But first, I'm gonna have a list of their names on screen. This is not exhaustive. I'm sure there's somebody I'm forgetting, and I'm gonna pin a comment with an updated list. If I forgot you or something, please say something and I'll add you to the pin, alright? Because I really want to shout out these people who stuck to their guns. The people who didn't stick to their guns, I know who you are. The people who talked a lot about Vincent and said how good he was and then didn't run him at all, I know who you are too, so just shame on you. But Seppi, Theologica, Snoopball, Jin Lee, Yoshi Pasta, Macnol with the City Info, Atweed Project, I hope I'm saying that right, Belial, Boy Kazith. All of y'all stuck to your guns, helped me formulate and reshape my opinions about Vincent, and I thank you for that as I learned more about the game because of it. Anyways, now that I've done that, like I said I would, again, I have no problem being wrong. In fact, I'm happy about it. But this video is a follow-up. I'm adjusting my opinions on Vincent. I'm going to explain what I would have changed had I known what I know now, and also adjust things moving forward to set the record straight. But it's going to get spicy again. Before I do that, please do the usual YouTube rigmarole. Is that the right word here? I don't know. Like this video, subscribe to my channel, please. Leave a comment with what you think about my changed opinion. Let me know. Again, push back. I might be wrong again. It's always good to have a good talk and learn more about stuff. I want to give another quick shout out to the more useless individuals in society. Some of the people who are a little who got way more dip on their chip than I did in my Vincent video. Some of the idiots who are accusing me of being angry that Vincent works better than I thought he would, among other things. Why would I be mad about getting a speculative analysis wrong? I learned about the game, I like the character, and he's better than I thought he was, and I grew as a player. What was I supposed to do? Double down and embarrass myself further? I really don't get what I'm supposed to do after being wrong. I got new information, so I changed the way I think about things. If I could go back and tell myself different, I mean, I opened myself up to counter arguments and I said I'd do this, I'd follow up if I was wrong, and I'd change my mind, and I'm doing exactly that. Why would I be mad? That's just goofy. I mean, I'm gonna push back where I think some points aren't good. For example, this before I get into it later, using Vincent on an HP silence fight when you silence the boss all the time can't take advantage of his debuffs. I think that was pointless, but I mean, I'll give credit where credit's due. It's not hard. I don't have ego invested over a video game, all right? That's just, don't be weird. And I should lose credibility. People should push back on me further. I'm not some sort of saint. I'm a guy with a microphone and like 3,000 subscribers on YouTube about a niche mobile game. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. I admit I make mistakes. I give my JP retrospectives to get my hot takes out there and see how my opinion changes. Knowing how wrong you are in life makes it much more easier to admit you were wrong in the future. So I try to be wrong as much as possible because you get to grow from that. Is that unreasonable? I don't know. I gave my opinion and I was wrong. Yeah, I don't know. People are just being weird about it. So if you're one of those special idiots, congrats. You have not succeeded in life. Well done. And I have no clue how long this video is going to be, so I'm just going to give my opinion, my updated opinion on Vincent now. I think he's solid now. I still think they lowballed him, and I think they should have additionally released him at an earlier time. I think that if they gave his LD a little bit more sauce, that being giving him an Imperial aura on his overhead so that he'd always be hitting weakness, similar to Vaughn and Bart's, I think he would have just been flawless. I focused too much on the element resist, so that was my mistake. But seeing how well he worked in the fights, despite being absorbed, really irons out either they should have released him earlier, or they should have given him a little more juice. I think that's the stance I took in my previous video, but now I've dropped the stance that obviously he wouldn't work, because that clearly was not the case. Obviously, I'm more excited to use him now. I crafted out some future ideas to use him. I've been running him not in videos but offline and doing some testing and ironing out my opinion. So yeah, definitely changed for the better. And if you skipped out on Vincent and you're now regretting it because of me, one, I am sorry, but two, you should not always follow the advice of YouTubers. You should iron out your own opinions. If you skipped a favorite, I am sorry for that, but push back on me, tell me I'm wrong, all that good stuff, because I can mess up and I can mislead people, and I try to own up to it whenever that happens. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to iron out the things that I got very wrong in my video and the bad thinking that I had and how I'm going to go about it in the future. First thing that I downplayed / learned is Vincent's ability to just sit there and let his debuffs be active. One of the big things that helped him in the fights, even if he was being absorbed, is that if one of his debuffs was active, he could completely neuter a recast, and that alone could justify his presence in the fight. Another thing is the enchanted follow-up. I think I mentioned this. I don't quite remember, but I didn't think that the enchanted follow-up would be worth it because he'd be getting absorbed. But obviously, if you don't want to use the skill that's going to be absorbed in that moment, you could just HP plus or Brave plus, or use the skill that isn't absorbed to secure a good break order. So you don't leave, if there's two bosses, so you don't leave one with Brave. That was an easy workaround. What else? Imperil immunity being a negative for Vincent, I completely underestimated the power of his 180% attack up, along with his debuff modifier. I think it's up to 6. Is it 10% for debuff? I don't remember. Anyways, that allowed him to hit extremely hard in the Medusa's fight and completely justify his presence there as an attack down character. So that was very solid. Saying something is impossible really got me in hot water, because I'm never saying something can't happen again, because there's always somebody insane enough to pull something off in this community. I've never just never getting. I'm gonna say I might not even go high, maybe highly unlikely, but impossible. Like when I said Vincent was dead because of thunder, like I've known that. I've run Garnet and water absorb. I've seen Inkwelder run Sabin and wind absorb and holy absorb, or both. I should have known that by now. That was just bad, and that I wish somebody again, if I'd realized this. Cognitive dissonance and confirmation bias I'm not immune to it. Clearly, like some of these things are like, oh, duh. What else? Oh yeah, I even said in the video I understand the power of his debuffs, but clearly I didn't, because more so how the debuffs interact with bosses. Attack down completely neutered the Medusa's recast. And in Eye Brave down, reduce their recovery to Eye Brave, and then do an attack. For example, who was it? The Seador Centipedes? Yeah, those guys. Vincent's Eye Brave down completely neutered that recast as well. I leaned way too hard on the fact that one of his elements was absorbance. Like I said earlier, just not thinking beyond bringing Vincent and working around it. Now, while I do still maintain that it's not fair that the content was working against him, that doesn't mean that he was shut out. And that was kind of what I stuck behind. And it was way too good to be true that they'd release a character who was completely blocked out. Now, again, content was working against him. And if it wasn't working against him, or if he had an Imperil aura on his overhead, then I probably would have passed on that and thought differently, but it is what it is. That was a big mistake. Another big mistake that I made was expecting there to be fights that were specifically Vincent would crush, similar to Balthier on Arciella and Seador's Lufenia, and Vivi on the boss rush number 1 and Zana's Lufenia. That was my standard, and I think that's a fair standard to have, as I still view Vivi and Balthier as pretty much perfect Geo first, who provided an alternative. And while Vincent didn't directly provide an alternative in upcoming fights, he did provide a option to go about things differently, provided you also had other party members. And that's one criticism I'm still going to maintain, because while Vincent has proven himself to be very effective in content, he does actually fall apart if you pull out some units alongside him, and I think that's worth calling out as well. He still got some flaws. I still don't agree with the people that's saying he's OP or he's like broken or stuff like that, but he is solid. But I'm gonna push back where I think is necessary, okay? And probably the biggest mistake that I realized very shortly after is that I asked players to do a deep dive on fights while presenting myself as peak of credibility. My own credibility, again, should take a hit, and I encourage people to double check me and push back. But this is the problem with content creation. If there's nobody to push back on you, and it's the halo effect, where if you get a lot of things right, or you seem like good in other areas, people take you at face value in other things. And it's why I emphasized, please prove me wrong. People did. That's important, so I'm putting out more info. But I put people in a position that you usually don't do research into fights and don't do deep dives into boss mechanics to explain to me how Vincent would work well on the bosses. That's a tall order, because I didn't do that, you know. So I didn't know how Attack Down and Eye Brave Down would interact with the upcoming bosses. So I didn't. You didn't hear the other argument. That's the problem. If you don't hear the other side, then it might be invisible to you. You might not even take it into consideration. So that was an enormous mistake on my part. So now, given my better understanding of Vincent and the game as a whole, I'm going to walk back through the old fights and kind of go more in depth of what I got wrong and how I would have gone about it knowing what I know now. Act 3, Chapter 1, Part 1, very good here because Imperial Immunity, so this means he only has 3 debuffs in practice, and because of his debuff modifier, he can hit hard. His attack down is very strong, and his sap, the attack down is so strong that the sap that Vincent gets back from his EX buff can potentially, if they're doing ones on the recast, then it doesn't matter if he can't hold Brave afterwards, because he'll just recover enough, and that's good enough for the fight. Other than that, he's there to hit hard, and he does decent damage, and he can sit there along other debuffers again, because he's only using 3. He's not relying on his Imperials. In fact, he doesn't need to he doesn't need to rely on those Imperials at all, which is pretty good. It's a pretty good pick there. RCL's Lost Chapter. I'm actually gonna give Vincent a not quite a great look here, mainly because most of the runs that were successful with Vincent used Balthier, and Balthier turned this stage into a lower tier of difficulty with his orb control and allowing Vincent to keep his stuff up. But I ran Vincent with Balthier on this stage, and I forget who the third was. It might have been Onion Knight, but one of the it's not a place where Vincent can necessarily shine. I mean, provided the attack down is up when it needs to be, it can be good. But this wasn't a pro Vincent stage necessarily. But to be fair, I did say that he would work on this fight, provided you could keep his debuffs on and dispel the boss effectively. If you ran Vincent with RCL and you kept the boss stun locked all fight, then I mean that's kind of sketchy. I mean that's not really showcasing Vincent. This isn't me being salty, it's me wanting to highlight Vincent's strengths. So if you lock the boss down or didn't give the boss turns, a couple people did that, and I don't think that's playing to Vincent's strengths. So I want to emphasize that this wasn't a great fight, and my standard that I went into it with was we need fights that showcase Vincent well, where he can be like, I'm glad I pulled him alone, and that was another mistake I made, and this fight wasn't it. At the same time, though, it's important to point out that this fight was pretty garbage, and Balthier made it bearable. So I'm not saying he was carried by Balthier on this fight, because that'd be ridiculous. But Vincent had a harder time if you took Vincent had a harder time if you took Balthier away, and this is again part of my testing where I tried to run them with and without units to show their strength. Right? Does that make sense? Am I being reasonable here? Next, for the Sayadora Act 3, Chapter 2, Part 2, the Centipedes. This fight was Thunder Immune, and I initially wrote Vincent off completely because of that, which was obviously a mistake. If you ran him with an Enchanter, it was mostly Butter, Kuja, or Onion Knight could enchant, and that worked out pretty well. But if you took out that enchant, it got a little bit more sketchy. You need to put a little bit more work in juggling debuffs, and it wasn't as smooth. And I have 2 minds on this. One, there's a team building aspect. You bring him with an enchanter to make sure that he can follow up and break them evenly, so you don't get screwed over. And again, pacing your HP plus and Brave plus so that you don't give them Brave when you don't need to. But at the same time, it did feel slightly clunky, and that is obviously, I think, a valid criticism of the kit. But obviously, he also shut down the recast and the Reaper Plus because they gained the Eye Brave, and then if Vincent shut him down with those debuffs, and they didn't really do anything. So that was a good shot, but again, it felt clunky. It was viable, just a little clunky. The Hellworm, the Paladin Cecil Lufeni was pretty easy. So the Thunder Absorb wasn't a big deal again, and Paladin Cecil was synergy. So running Paladin Cecil with Vincent here again could just highlight or provide him with a consistent enchant, such that he can definitely always follow up correctly. And again, it was a little sketchy bringing him here in my testing, again, without an enchanter. But if you're bringing him if you don't have an enchanter, you might have a harder time. But with an enchanter, it was also kind of buttery. Just, again, make sure not to use the skills where he's absorbed right before the boss turn, and then smooth sailing. The Biosoul, the Kai's Lost Chapter. Here, well, Vincent had some interesting interactions with the bosses. You could actually eat the attack after they do Union, and since if their attacks were nerfed hard enough, then it actually wouldn't be that big of a deal if you were to eat it. So some people ran them like that. While you still did need to launch, Vincent could still bring decent damage, and if you brought enough launch, he could pull off the fight off just fine. And I think I said that in my initial analysis too. It was like he works fine here, but why would you bring him? And well, the reason to bring him is to shut down. If you can't get off a launch in time, just eat it, and it won't do much damage because they're neutered pretty much. For Transcendence 1, Crucible 1, I think the left one it is with the turrets, Vincent could enchant his, he could get his follow-up enchanted with Paladin Cecil, his attack down, prevented the bosses from nuking you. That alone, solid. I think I called that out in my initial video. I don't remember for sure, but I think I downplayed it slightly. No, what I did say, that's right. I said that he's not doing holy damage, but again, I forgot about the follow-up being non-elemental. Huge mistake. He was used on the right node, I think, just to make the turtles not hit hard. And on the final node, he was used to shut down the attack of the ulti bosses, which worked pretty well. And these bosses didn't absorb any of his elements, so people a lot of the time chose to just burn a lot of his skill 1, his fire attack here, and they decided to burn his skill 2, the attack down on the later wave, and not really needing to use his skill 1, the Eye Brave down. But you could juggle it, just need to time it correctly, and with some proper adjustments. And again, I think I might be proven wrong on this, so I'm not sure about this, but I think all the runs with Vincent needed an enchanter for the second wave to guarantee he could, because running Vincent when he's absorbed without an enchanter can potentially get very sketchy depending on how the debuffs are juggled. But if you enchant, you're pretty much guaranteeing that the follow-up will re-break and you won't have any issues. That's pretty good as well. Again, the fine line between team building, and I think I want to give him credit, but at the same time, it starts to fall apart if you don't bring a certain unit, and I think that's a criticism worthy of calling out. I think I was in the ballpark when I called that out in my first video, but obviously he was a very key asset to the stage if you brought the right units. And that stage is already hilariously restrictive, so the fact that Vincent was able to get through it is a good thing in itself. I was completely wrong on that front. Again, I can't say that enough. So TLDR, Vincent would definitely proved his worth in these fights. You needed a little bit more effort to make him work in the the element absorb stages. You still needed to kind of fidget with that, but I was completely wrong by saying he was locked out. Clearly that wasn't the case, and provided his debuffs were up, and provided you built around that, the content was still working against him. I want to highlight that, and I hope the devs heard that, because I would prefer they release GL first that can be effective in future upcoming fights unhindered. And Vincent was objectively hindered. He wasn't shut out, but he was hindered. And I think either they should address that more closely going forward to do more global firsts. But again, he worked, and that's what matters. Definitely sticking hard to, he would have been smooth as butter with an Imperial Aura on his overhead. But now I want to delve into upcoming fights again and adjust my earlier predictions so that maybe I can get it right this time. Now that I have more knowledge of how Vincent works and how kind of the game and debuffs work as a whole, I'm going to be a bit more gracious, and hopefully I can be closer to the mark this time. If not, I'll continue to learn. Divine Ramuh, this is an interesting one because it's Thunder Absorb and it's attack down immune. So that's a big F for Vincent on his skill 2. There might be some way to Eye Brave cheese this, but I don't see it at all. Now, I'm not going to say he won't work. I'm saying I don't see it. So I'm curious to see what people pull off there. Because if you're not bringing Vincent for the attack down, you have to bring him for the Eye Brave down. And if you lock Ramuh down the entire fight, it's going to be single target. That might be a little sketchy as well. And on top of that, so let's say you enchanted Vincent and he's just doing normal damage. But if his Eye Brave down is up, you're gonna need to block off Ramuh's buffs, and the Eye Brave down will probably fall off. I just don't see it. I'm excited to see what creative people come up with, because I certainly can't think. I'm gonna try per usual, but I don't know about Vincent on this fight, guys. I really want to see it, but I don't see it here. But let's see. But what's one fight after clearly being viable for the last month of fights, and I was wrong on that front, So if he takes an L here, it is what it is. Eldnar's Lufenia, I think he might be able to shut the recast down with his Eye Brave and attack down. This might work, and especially if there's 3 targets on the field, he's going to cap all the time like normal. So he might be viable here. He might be solid here. I don't know. I again don't know how the Eye Brave and attack down will interact with the nasty recast on the Eldnar's boss, but I'm curious to see how it works there. And the Aranea fight, again, this one is again kind of sketchy because it's Fire Absorb and it's immune to Thunder Resist down, but it's not Thunder Absorb. So I think in order for Vincent to hit weakness, he'd need an enchant. Nope, it would have to be a Thunder Enchanter, and or he would have to bring Reno's debuff potentially. So I could see a Vincent, Reno, and someone run working. And I think the Eye Brave down and attack down would be good, because the Superior Knights, the RNA bosses, have a really nasty attack when they turn red that can blow you up. So Vincent might completely shut that down. So yeah, Vincent and Reno for that. I could see that working pretty well. The Ishtola Lufenia Heretic thingamabobber. The orb is to increase by 5 when the player recovers at least 50% HP with an ability. This one is interesting because they go into a really nasty mode where they cleanse and they become immune to all debuffs, and they don't get to go until they use their HP attack. And this is really the nasty thing that I wish Vincent would be able to shut down, because of the debuff immunity, he won't be able to really counteract it. And it's this nasty attack where they hit whoever has the highest HP, and you're supposed to expect to like tank it or revive through it potentially. Other than that, the count steam is very nasty as a boss, so when you are available to debuff it, then Vincent will be able to shut them down, so he'll be plenty viable here. It's just for the really nasty part. It's unfortunate that his debuffs won't be able to work, but again, he'll be fine probably. The Trey Lufenia, that's another attack down immune one. That's where, but at the same time, he will handle the orb with the sap, and maybe the Eye Brave down will make them spam HP attacks and not delay you. But you're getting broken regardless, and maybe you can mitigate with Gladio. I can see it potentially working, but again, this is not a knock against Vincent. This fight actually just kind of sucks. But again, I could see it here too. So yeah, he'd be fine here probably. And Boss Rush 3, as I learned with Medusas, Imperial Immune is actually a blessing for Vincent. So I'm flipping it around. Vincent will be solid here. It is immune, like I said, immune to an elemental resist down. But the first orb is sap, and he'd probably be fine on the first wave. Second wave, third wave, probably not the fourth wave because of the debuff condition, but that's fine in and of itself. And we're gonna go even another month further, so I can maybe sell him a bit better, because I was looking ahead, I'm like, maybe Vincent actually might work better in the wave future than he is immediately. The Terra Lufenia, the Humbabas, this one's a little tragic, unfortunately, and again, just one fight out of the few isn't a bad thing. It's immune to attack down and Eye Brave down. And it's a Thunder Absorb as well, so that's a lot of knocks against Vincent. So you probably don't want to bring him here, on top of being rage resistant. And if you use elements below 50%, you get hit. They dispel all your buffs, and they delay you 6 turns. Now this can be mitigated by using someone like Galuf, because their attack, their counter is not guaranteed hit, so you can dodge it and keep going. But if it's immune to all Vincent's debuffs, it's probably not a great idea to bring him here. But at this point, he's been out for 2 months, and he's been doing his thing for 2 months, so we can afford him some L's here. The Amida Tellian Lost Chapter, Vincent might actually do really well here, because I know the way they worked is you delayed yourself after every turn, but Vincent has high turn rate, so he might send himself back up. And the attack down and the Eye Brave down, if they recover from Eye Brave fast and they just do a normal HP attack and don't mess you up, that actually might be better for you as a whole. So I could see that working as well. And the fun thing is he could probably stack his Eye Brave down with Amida Tellian's Eye Brave down potentially for some other fun stuff. So could be fine there. The Mog Lufenia, the Dullahan, is not a real fight, so I'm not even going to bother with that. The Kaiser Behemoth, the Garland and 7 thing, it is immune to Eye Brave down, and it's Imperial immune, but there is a Warrior Light Mannequin that's equally annoying here, and I think if you Eye Brave down the Warrior Light Mannequin, he might not give as many shields, and well, Vincent could pretty much neuter the Warrior Light Mannequin, and he might not be able to do anything, and he might just bring solid AoE damage to the Kaiser Behemoth. So I can see him working fine there, and the Behemoth hits really hard. So if you attack down that guy as well, that's a blessing. So that's Brave down and Imperial immune. So Vincent's really only putting up his attack down and his EX debuff. So that leaves a lot of room for other stuff for Vincent to potentially shine. Getting a little bit more, and this is turning very positive. What's it called? Desh's Lost Chapter, which I hate. These bosses are really nasty. They like to blow you up, but they're not immune to any Vincent's debuffs. The downside is that they do cleanse a lot in between phases. However, I think in the last 50% of the fight, they don't cleanse at all, and it's pretty much a race to not get blown up, and the HP requirement is really low. But I think if their Eye Brave is really low and their attack's really low, then it could end up working out very well. That might be a blessing as well. Unfortunately, Vincent can't hit the orb on his normal skills, because you're supposed to deal HP damage to all enemies in one turn. But as for neutering the boss so you don't get blown up and you meet that HP requirement, Vincent might do really well there. Now, the Transcendence 2, I think Vincent might actually be a monster here. The Lunatic Commander Beast on the left, Crucible, so Transcendence 2, Crucible 1. There's 3 bosses potentially, and the orb is delay, but there's nothing explicitly shutting out Vincent, and there's 3 targets again with add, so he could potentially work very well there. Where he really might work well is on the right side, however, the side that's supposed to sell Ferris. It's the Sid they're like chicken reskins, the turret chickens, I think it is. And the orb is +1 when the target takes elemental weakness brave damage, and they are inherently weak to fire and thunder, which are both of Vincent's elements. So he could probably solo handle this orb alongside Ferris or some other debuffers. So the beauty again of Vincent is that he can just hit weak, he can hit hard regardless of if his imperils are up or not. And since they're inherently weak to his stuff, and they're not going to be hitting hard, provided you can probably frame some debuffs around it, I think he'd be solid there too. I think I might actually use Vincent here when Transcendence 2 comes around. And then the Reckoning, the first wave is to hit elemental weakness damage, fire or thunder, water or dark. Vincent can hit that and it's +4, and he'll be nerfing it's the Kai's bosses, so he'll be stopping them from hitting you hard, handling the orb. The second wave is delay. So that's not pretty for Vincent in a single target, so it won't be great, but you could obviously just get him through that wave and punch through. And then the last wave is +2 when the target's afflicted with 5 or more debuffs. They do get frames, but again, this could just be mitigated by like a Ferris call or something, so Vincent's always hidden weakness. And so I think he'd actually be even better in Transcendence 2 than Transcendence 1. Really, the only thing up in the air for me is Vincent's damage and if he can keep up, but I think his modifiers and his attack up might be enough to sustain him just hitting hard consistently over the next 2 months again. So, looking pretty bright. Well, I think that's all I really wanted to say, given that this video is over 20 minutes now. Overall, let's conclude. I think I'd rate Vincent solid, whatever that means. Obviously, plenty viable. I went way too far considering him locked out on fights just because one of his skills was absorbed. Clearly that was a mistake, a big one, and I put people in a spot where they didn't know how to prove me wrong, so I'm trying to rectify that now. Again, always push back on content creators. If you think something's wrong, show data, prove it wrong. Proof is there. I'm a human, I make mistakes. Obviously I can own up to them, I'm not a weirdo. It's just a game. I like Vincent, and now that I came at it from a different perspective, looking at the future, I'm actually slightly more excited to use them than I was before. So really, I didn't lose anything. Glad to be wrong. Like I said before, it's not a big issue. The game, like I said, did work against him, and I think that was good feedback, and I hope they heard that. And if they release more global first, and like I said in my my myth of shutouts, the shutouts are largely calming down anyways. So I think they should be on track to release a global first again, and I really hope they do. All the people simping and saying, oh, you know, we don't deserve a global first character anymore. You guys, Square Enix ain't getting y'all a check either, so just stop. That's cringe. Don't say that. I feel more justified in saying he should have released earlier because his debuffs did do work on these fights, provided you also grab something else. And again, my standard was GL first should shake things up on their own and not lean heavy on others. And Vincent needing more of an Imperialer and needing to lean harder on other units. From one perspective, you could say that it was due to the nature of his kit as a debuffer and as an elemental. So there's risk and reward or pros and cons, but I think strongly now that either he should have come first he should have come earlier, and or he should have had an Imperial Aura on his base LD so that he wouldn't have to be worried about bringing Enchanter alongside him so he could really shine. I think that would have been for the best. Obviously, it's too late now, and I don't expect them to adjust him. But like I laid out earlier, his future is definitely looking a lot brighter. So, pretty nice. This was humbling, and I'm glad to learn about the game even more. I know people have been wondering where this was, and I've been just split doing other stuff. I gotta calm the Lufenia plus Doom down, and among other things, I work. You know, people got lives, you know. But hopefully this was helpful. Tell me what you guys think. I don't really know what else to call to action here. But thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for sticking around. Hopefully, I gave a better analysis this time around that ages a little bit better. And let's see what else the community can do with Vincent. I'm gonna try and continue to try it as well. All right. On that note, please like the video, comment, subscribe, and all that YouTube stuff. And I'll catch you guys later. Bye.